Well, hello everybody, and welcome to yet another sparkling edition of the Inworld Review, the news and discussion show where we are focused on the metaverse. This is the world of immersive spaces online, basically communities of engagement and visual delight. And well, I don't know, there's so many descriptions we can put in there. It is today, of course, the 11th of April, and we are coming to you this week from our regular studios over on the Great Canadian Grid, hypergrid enabled broadcast studios. Last week, of course, we were in Second Life for our first Saturday of the month gig. Not realizing till last course it was a holiday week, quite quiet too. But we had a nice little program over there this week. For the last 3 weeks, unfortunately, due to a little bit of an infection, we haven't been able to be joined by Maria Korolov. But I am pleased to say she is back with us today. So here's a formal welcome to Maria. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Mel. I'm hoping that my voice will hold out because, as you mentioned, I had laryngitis these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it does show, but we will forgive you. See, you are far too important, and your news is far too important for us to worry about the quality of your voice. I just hope you can survive us before you squeak away like a little mouse or something. But I'm sure we'll somehow get through to it. If you're struggling, let us know. We'll just divert the conversation a bit. Now, thanks also to my other co-host, who's normally here, Tara Yates, who's actually handling the streaming of this program today. She's actually decided to step out of the program today in the co-host chair, as it were. But I'm sure she'll be back with us shortly. But I have two wonderful guests in the studio this week, one of whom would possibly have been with us last week, but everything went awry at the last minute. And she is the first guest. She is Jessica Lyon, who many of you will know as the sort of chief developer, I guess, CEO of the Firestorm Viewer. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Definitely not a developer, but
yeah,
project manager.
Project manager. That sounds suitably vague.
And I'm here on the Canada Grid from Canada. So
yes,
great to be here.
Indeed. Actually, very appropriate that you're a Canadian on the Canada Grid. It's been bad luck so far. What's his name? Felon Corrimal, VWPE.
Oh,
he's
dear.
Canadian too, and so far all the shows he's ended up on have been on Second Life, and we ought to actually get him over here. He's Canadian for Canada. But our other guest, oddly enough, he's not a native Canadian, but as I realised recently, he's been living in Canada himself for a couple of years, so it's all highly appropriate. And that's John Lester, otherwise known as Pathfinder Lester, or Path as I call him, and once upon a time, a Pathfinder Linden. Welcome, Path. Oh, and I see.
Oh, we don't have his voice. We did have his voice.
Oh, that was me. That was because I muted my
there you
microphone.
go.
Ah, fair enough.
Yes, I'm also in Canada. It was a moose got my microphone. Sorry about
A moose. Fair enough.
But I was saying I've been living here for almost 4 years now in Montreal, and
Right.
actually I just got
Montreal,
and I've got my permanent residency here now too. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
So you are a
Yay.
Canadian citizen.
You and I
No,
have
no,
to
no, not yet.
meet up for coffee. Because I'm only 3 hours
cool.
away from
I
you.
love that.
Ah,
Oh, cool.
small world. Yeah.
We're all on the Canadian grid. This is crazy.
And more importantly, well, as I keep talking to Roddy on the Canadian grid here, actually we're also sort of held together by what we in Britain call the Commonwealth, because Australia and Canada and all various places, I guess that.
Oh, the Queen's on my money here.
I know.
Yeah.
It might once have been
What's up
an
with that?
imperial asset, but the Commonwealth is a nice continuing principle. It's not really about empire. It's just it's in the word really, Commonwealth. So we're held together by that. Anyway, I digress. The Commonwealth, of course, is an affiliation of states in the real world, and we're much more interested in affiliation of states, or should I say platforms, in the virtual world. I'd like to apologize in advance here for those of you who see me talking and my lips aren't moving. Instead, you're getting a nice, basically my face animation is meant to be working with talk, and it looks like it's frowning and rather displeased without my lips
Your
moving.
avatar
Anyway,
is
there's
not
like hidden.
happy.
To have it. Me, it's just a scowling face while you're listening to the radio. That's probably the best way to do it. Anyway, I actually have open here my own Twitter feed, which you can find at twitter.com/Malburns, or one word, MALBURNS. And I say I've got it open, but for some strange reason it went away. There we are, good old iPad. And just a quick rundown on the main news of the week. We haven't had Maria, of course, for 3 weeks, so there's an awful lot of news that she may wish to catch up on shortly. But I've highlighted most of that up until last weekend. The first link literally came a few hours ago today, which I thought was interesting. It's a retweet from a Twitter called Roblin VR. And it's the BBC chief has hinted that virtual reality and Ultra HD initiatives are on the table. It's always good to hear how the BBC are wasting the licence fees' money. But maybe they're not wasting it. I don't know. Let's see. As well as Hypergrid Business, of course, Maria operates a site called Hyberica. And I guess during her convalescence, she's been doing a lot of jumping around because there have been a lot of entries this week at Hyberica. One of which, interestingly, was the announcement of a United Kingdom grid, which so far I have not been able to log into. It's a kind of region not found or stuff, but maybe I will find my way into there and check it out at some point. A few items in the week that Maria's also covered, so I will leave those till she comes on and just come back to anything we miss. There was an article in the week on 3D virtual objects that can be touched again. I haven't read it. You'll have to look at my feed, but basically this is mixed technologies, really, where you have the virtual world simulating object in 3D, but you have other aspects of the interface that simulate touch and feel of those actual objects. I imagine that will work quite rather well if you have something like one of those programs that give you a virtual ball of putty, and you sort of squash the putty around to manipulate into a shape, and you're doing with the mouse is rather odd, and but maybe with leap motion and the actual ability to actually somehow feel the surface you were touching, you will be able to literally mold shapes. Maybe we'll no longer be sort of coding prims, but we'll be literally squashing them together into shapes we want. That's actually quite intriguing. So various other articles, 10 ways virtual reality is revolutionizing medicine and art care. The Sim Street Journal, which at WordPress.com is more often seen as a sort of Second Life occasional paper, but it did have an interesting roundup this week called Realities Blend, and it was equally appropriate to the greater metaverse. Right, Avacon, yes, these are all lovely Hyperica posts. Masses of them this week, unbelievable. Also, I can't give you a direct link for this, but there is a VR smartphone adapter called Freely. That's FREEFLY. And it launched today, except it didn't. It was launched today, 2 days ago. And I went rushing around to PC World to see if I could find it here. Because I believe the first launch was here in the UK. And I haven't been able to find it for love of money. But it is about $60. And it's derived from the idea Google boards. bumpable. When you unfold it, it has adjusters, which it means you can actually you can slot any smartphone or iPod or anything of any size into it, because it's got some mechanical system separate from the lens that allows you to adjust it to the size of anything you carry around. It doesn't look to be big enough to handle even an iPad mini, but otherwise it will handle the variety of mini and maxi sizes of smartphones. Also, I posted against PoliticsCon, which was very interesting. We reported last week, of course, on the demise of the OnLive service, which brought fast video streaming of the Second Life viewer and indeed Jessica's Firestorm viewer to people via video streaming technology, which was integrated with other patented stuff that allowed you to upload actions and things whilst the stream was coming down. And despite the cost, it actually proved very popular with many people, because it allowed them to use Second Life in full graphics resolution, even though they might be on a lower MPC or a smart device with lower capabilities than the workstation. Their patents and assets are all brought up by Sony, who promptly said they weren't going to actually do anything with OnLive itself. They were going to discontinue it. I'm still laughing about the fact that there was a major furore in Second Life and a petition at change.org to save Second Life Go. And I keep thinking, well, how much traction that's going to get? Because, it would have been better, I think, to get together with a few other services and actually petition for OnLive to be saved, rather than just SL Go, which is one of their backwaters, to be saved. But interestingly, in the aftermath of this, GamePolitics.com actually had an interview with the founder of what was probably OnLive's only real rival at the time, Gakai. And the founder, it's an article where he looked back at OnLive editor. And Gakai is actually interesting to us because I had tried it once. It was great. Linden Labs, who run the Second Life platform, which is, of course, a closed world, did actually experiment with it. And I remember going in there on the web as a guest and also logging in via Gakai as my regular avatar and sort of meeting myself and meeting friends in World. And it didn't matter whether they were using Gakai on the web or whether they actually had their Second Life client. So they're all same place. You couldn't travel the whole Second Life this way because the experiment only involved particular regions that they'd set up to perform this way. But the video resolution was great and it all was very smooth. And this was maybe 2 or 3, maybe more years ago, long before the name OnLive was on the tip of everybody's tongue as this brand new thing. So we might discuss a bit more about that later. Of the grids that Maria has posted as new places, destinations at Hyperica, my eyes did light up at one, which is called the United Kingdom grid. I wonder why I should have been interested in that, says the brisk British voice. Well, so far I haven't been able to get into it. It doesn't. The region is reporting it doesn't exist. I do be interested to explore there, but at the moment we're quite happy over here in Canada. After all, it is a fellow Commonwealth country, so what the hell. Okay, some things I retweeted too. There was a post from VR Focus on Ireland, the latest virtual relaxation atmosphere from Feel Relaxation. They've got the spelling all wrong. I don't think they're very professional, this lot, or maybe just the reporter isn't. But basically, it's an immersive experience of Ireland, which is focused totally on ambience. In other words, it's not a game. It's not particularly a community. Or it is simply a virtual world. I suppose it's a bit like playing one of those soundtrack albums of birds or whale voices and things. The idea is to create a mood and atmosphere that you can absorb, immerse yourself in, as a more solitary occupation. And I'm sure there is a place for that. I quite enjoy solitary virtual environments now and again. Obviously, people continue to talk about VR as the big thing, long-term potential, be excited, etc., etc. And various reports on the Hypergrid Safari, which I would remind you happens every week at, I never know, at noon Pacific time on Wednesdays. And generally speaking, the clubhouse at Franco Grid, which has been the base of operations whilst OS Grid was away and sort of rather established, I do gather so that they sort of tending to move back to their OS Grid clubhouse as the starting point. So those of you coming on Wednesdays, if you're in the habit of going to the Franco Grid clubhouse, it might just be worth double checking that they're not starting at the OS Grid clubhouse instead. This one actually came from Second Life's official blog, which was really quite interesting. I actually met this lady some years ago when she opened a virtual architecture installation here in London. Her avatar name is sort of China Tracy, or at least in Second Life, but her real name is Cao Fei, and she's a Chinese artist. And there was an interview with her talking about Second Life and virtual cities and things, and her art region, a new art region called Shadow Play. And she was interviewed by the New York Times during the week to talk about it, because she's actually one of these rather highly recognized artists in the very general sense of the word over in China and internationally. So people do take notice of what she's doing. But a lot of research from somebody called Meta Maria. I can't think who that is. Anyway, whatever it was I was reading. Virtuality. It's a quite big thing, really. Safari, more Hyperica links. Let me see. Scrolling down rapidly. I don't want to waste your time. Diva Canto, that's Crystal Lopez, the inventor of the Hypergrid, of course, at her blog, metaverseinc.com. She had a small post. She doesn't blog very often. She had a small post up this week saying Wi-Fi for grids has changed considerably. Please read this. That actually has to do with back-end code for open simulators, if you're into that side of things. A meeting in Boston, the Boston VR meetup, on the 29th of April coming up, and it's going to be dedicated to architecture and virtual spaces. Back to architecture here, small world. And I finally got to the bit where it says Inworld Review, 4th of April, which means that I've come back to the end of the week. So those are actually some highlights. I haven't mentioned the stuff at Hypergrid Business because I'm now going to throw the microphone, as it were, across to Maria for a quick summary of that, and then we'll move into some general conversation and possibly come back to some of those news items I've mentioned. So with that, over to you, Maria. Croaks will be forgiven. Hello, Maria. Are you muted? Hello, Maria.
Perhaps she's lost her voice completely.
I have been hitting the microphone button, and apparently I've been hitting the wrong one. Okay.
You are back with us. Wonderful.
I am back with you, and you guys can... And I'm going to work my way backwards to where you guys saw me last.
Right.
So the thing that I've been working on last night is something called the destination guide. And I'm really fortunate that Jessica's here today because that's something I can actually ask her about. So every grid has the opportunity to create a second lifestyle destination guide. And if you click on a destination guide, you will get a destination guide for that grid. And Austin Tate from the OpenView grid and Gavin Hurd from the XMirror grid posted some instructions about how to configure your OpenSim to point to a destination guide page and create a couple of examples. And I use that as a model to create a destination guide based on Hyperica. And you guys can grab it right now. Anybody can use it on their own grid. Right now, it has a section for the top grids, and it has the links to the 15 most popular grids out there. And then I'm going to have a section for all grids, group by alphabet. I'm working my way through the alphabet right now. There are, at last count, over 200 some hypergrid enabled grids. Latest stats from my database today: 425 OpenSim public grids total.
Good.
That's 100 more than last month.
Whoa.
So we are seeing some serious growth numbers. If anyone doubts it, my readership has doubled on hypergrid business beginning of this year from end of last year. We've got 30,000 active users, which is double the 15,000 we had last year. Again, this is, these are numbers. These aren't exact. There's some, overlap between grids, and some grids don't report hypergrid, some do. But we're seeing some significant growth here. But back to the viewer. So the thing is, the three viewers, three main V3 viewers, Singularity, Firestorm, and Kakua. Some of them, when you teleport to a grid, some of them show the destination guide for the grid you're on, and some of them show the destination guide for the grid you started out on.
Yeah.
So first question. Second question, when you click on a hypergrid link inside the destination guide, there's several ways to code a hypergrid link. There's a hop2 code, there's a work consistently across all three viewers. So what I want to know is if the viewer developers are working on kind of getting that onto a single thing.
Let me interrupt there. I should have told Pathfinder and Jessica, do feel free to interrupt. And this sounds like an ideal thing that
Good
Jessica may
opportunity.
want to cover. Also, it's I think we should consider Maria's voice today, so give her a few little rests whilst she leaves the news.
Chance to have some tea.
Yes.
So the question is, are the third-party viewers working on Destination Guide? Could be. This is the first I've heard about OpenSim grids taking advantage of the Destination Guide. Now that I'm aware of it, we could possibly make that happen. I'm just going to make a wild guess and guess that Singularity does work with the OpenSim Destination Guide.
They all work. They all work. But
they all work
in different ways. They all work.
Right.
Singularity, Kakua, and Firestorm all work. They all support it. We were very happy about that. But each one works slightly differently. That kind of makes things kind of weird and breaky, and it gives weird error messages.
Well, it's interesting that it works. At least I can only speak for Firestorm. It's interesting that it works at all. Actually,
it works
because we've designed ours to work with obviously the Linden Lab Destination Guide, and OpenSim didn't have any such thing at the time. I wasn't aware until just this minute that OpenSim is now interested in utilizing the Destination Guide. That's definitely something that we can investigate in improving. Maybe, Maria, after the show, you could provide me some links to that tutorial you were speaking of, and maybe some pointers to somebody I can speak to about it. The developer on the Firestorm team is Mobius Raya. She does did all the integrating of our splash screen and destination guide and that kind of stuff. And I'd be happy to, obviously first I'm going to have to find out in what way Firestorm is working and what way it isn't working, what needs to be improved, and then we can look at how to improve it.
All right. And the question about the hop2 protocol, it's not even a guide specific. It's for any people who want to do, like, put an Inworld media with a link on it, for example. So there's several different protocols for doing that, and each viewer uses a slightly different one. And so, for example, in Firestorm, if I use the protocol with the 2 exclamation marks in it, it works. It brings up the map, but it also gives me an error message saying it can't find Second Life in the grid list. So if you ignore the error message, you can teleport, but it's still weird error message to get. Anyway, so I'll talk to you about that later.
I don't know whether it's worth my interjecting at this point, because what I'm about to say may be a separate matter, but I'm wondering if it may be linked to. I tend to be logged in here in Canada most of the time in the week. I'm often AFK, but I just sort of out of habit to stay logged in because I'm working on the iPad or whatever, so why quit, you know? And, you know, I will go shopping or looking for freebies or whatever. And normally I don't really have any problems hypergridding around. You know, obviously if I go via Sanctuary or somewhere, I might find a gate that's red or something and is therefore offline as opposed to blue when it's online, or however that works. So on the hypergrid, we are used to grids that are temporarily down, or, especially ones that are hosted on private servers. But I have been like going on Safari and things. The last 2 weeks have been absolutely awful. I've been following published links and just not getting to those destinations. Then I've been going over to Safari, Sanctuary, and I haven't been able to get to them from there, which is my sort of default tactic. And today, very bizarrely, I was talking to Jessica here, and she was logged in with her main hypergrid avatar, I guess, over on the Littlefield grid, and I think she got in here in the end. Well, you still are. You're here now, but you've registered an avatar here. But also, I actually pressed on a link to a Littlefield grid, and I didn't it showed us online, and it started to sort of teleport me there, and then I got this weird message that I'd never seen before, saying that Littlefield does not allow avatars from Great Canadian Grid. And I thought, what?
It sounds like that could be a generic error message.
Yeah.
It's not handling the error properly.
Now, they just released a new version of OpenSim, 0.8.1.
Yeah.
And every grid has a different upgrade schedule. Some grids upgrade right away to the latest thing because, you know, they want to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Some grids only upgrade when the official release are there. Some grids only update after the first bug fixes is out. Some grids wait for the second bug fixes. And other grids are super conservative. They're always running the previous release just to be on the safe side.
Sounds like our users.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense. So every time a new major release comes out, you're going to have this period where you're going to have compatibility issues, and the compatibility issues will change. So after you've made allowances for the previous set of incompatibilities from like a couple of months ago, now all those workarounds don't work anymore, and now you're going to have to find a whole new set of workarounds.
Well,
and that just has to do with the fact that we're still early on, and we're evolving really quickly.
Yeah, I did sort of wonder that, but there were there were a couple of snags here, because this led me to realize that actually grids are capable of being hypergrid enabled and deliberately putting code in that bans visitors from maybe grids that they consider major competition or something.
And that's only happened once in the history of OpenSim. OS Grid versus Metropolis. It was a big PR disaster for OS Grid.
I bet it was.
I don't think any other grid has done that since, except accidentally in terms of configuration settings, where two grids are configured differently, and so they can't do the handshake.
Okay, the other issue that is maybe related to this, and I'll mention it now because I think it's just a quick yes or no sort of answer if anybody's got it, and that is that I logged in join onto Hypergrid by logging into with my OS Grid avatar, because I've been going over to get some various things in OS Grid, and they when I was on OS Grid, they were being put in my local folder instead of my suitcase. I was coming back to them, and they wouldn't realize they were unusable, or said I didn't have permissions. So I went in as my OS Grid avatar, and I'd never really looked, but I was astonished to get, especially given that OS Grid, while it's up, has always been, the developer's grid, and you expect them to be playing with new codes. I suddenly realized my OS Grid avatar doesn't have and has never had a suitcase. And everything I get in OS Grid gets delivered to my local folder, and seems to assume that local folder is OS Grid. So when I then hyperjump back here to Canada, some items seem to come through the cache, and they could be resed, and I could res them and then leave them for my regular avatar to pick up later. But other items still weren't res either, because of course they were in the local inventory of another grid, not in my suitcase. And I thought, how can OS Grid, with its status and, supposedly updated, always current software, possibly not have a suitcase?
Well, I don't have a suitcase on Hyperica.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, and not that I'm Pathfinder would probably be better to answer this, but because I'm not a frequent user of OpenSim, but this was the first time I've seen the suitcase.
Oh, okay. Well,
no, I don't like the suitcase, and so I have it permanently turned off on my whole grid. I just don't like the additional level of protection it offers is insignificant to me, because I don't have any secret hydrate stuff in my inventory. If you want my inventory, feel free. Everything is called primitive. And there's like 5,000 of it.
I know.
You just to try to figure something out with that inventory. Good luck to you. But the annoyances of the moving things in and out of suitcase were just like too much of a headache. So I had my hosting company turn it off. And every grid does it on their own option.
I actually have got used to turning it on, because it, for some things I've actually discovered is quite essential. For example, I keep all the stuff I'm wearing and my attachments and hubs, for example, in my suitcase, and it seems to be the way they're sure to turn up when I hypergrid. If I have something, say an article of clothing I'm wearing in my local inventory here in Canada, and it's copy protected or transfer protected, which means I can't take it out, then the moment I try and drop it from my local inventory into the suitcase, it will refuse to move to the suitcase. So at least I'll be forewarned. So by keeping everything transportable in the suitcase folders as opposed to the inventory folders, I've actually grown to quite fond of the suitcase as a management technique.
That's because
I like my suitcase. I like my suitcase.
Yeah, I'm actually renowned. I'm actually renowned on the Hypergrid Safari, aren't I, Pathfinder, as the only person who ever arrives with his hair intact. And everybody's asking me for my hair because it always seems to arrive with me.
Yeah, I like it because I tend to collect a lot of stuff, and I always look for anything new just in my suitcase. That way I can always kind of sort through things, and I actually enjoy going through the suitcase and being like, oh, here's the stuff that I picked up on the, this scavenger hunt on this grid, and here's these.
It's a bit like it's a bit like Second Life's delivery system, isn't it? Where it shows you recent items or just delivered items. And
I really
in the suitcase. Yeah. Sorry, Marie.
Now another factor is that Great Canadian Grid is a filtered grid. It filters exports. OS Grid is a non-filtered grid. It does not filter any exports. It's a fully open grid. And so the suitcase plays a different role on a filtered grid, like you were mentioning. you can't put things in the suitcase if it's not allowed to leave the grid.
No.
So it's a useful tool on the filtered grids. But anyway, moving
I'm with
on.
you. Right. Okay.
The reason you're seeing so many entries popping up in Hyperica was because thanks to our advertisers on Hypergrid Business, thank you guys. I appreciate you all very much. I've been able to hire a part-time assistant for Hyperica.
I wondered
And
about
he
that.
spends several hours a week adding new destinations onto Hyperica. And not only that, but I have hired a database programmer who set up a database for me where every 10 hours I check the full list of the 700 destinations in my database and check to see if they're up or not, and post the status to this central database, which is in the Google App Engine. So it's super fast and cloud enabled and everything. And anybody else who wants to can grab the status. It's a simple URL, and you can grab the status of any hypergrid destination, and it will show you what % of the time it's been up over the past 30 days, and the last time it was up, and when it was last checked.
So there's actually a public front end to this database,
Yes,
as it were.
yes.
Wonderful,
It's
wonderful.
not a pretty one, but it's useful.
Well,
So if you want to incorporate it into your own, so if you want to incorporate it into your own grid system, you can do that without having to hit every single region all the time, because that would be too much of a burden on individual region servers. So I figured if I'm doing this, other people are going to want to do this too. Why don't I just share the data? It's not going to cost me anything to share the data. I'll just put it up there, and that way people don't have to reinvent the wheel and redo everything, and I'll just have that up there and people can use it.
Is it a database that just gives you that information, or is the database itself categorized into categories of grids and things like
No, it's a simple table. All it has is the hypergrid address, date checked, and if it's up or down.
Right.
All it has.
I know when I go to Sanctuary, for example, there's masses of these hypergates, and you can tell offline ones because when they were last checked, they turned different color. But I was there today actually trying to find Littlefield because none of my Littlefield links would work. Well, it turned out it didn't work anyway, even when I got to that side. But I look there and it's like landing at an enormous version of Stonehenge or something. You've got to wander around this entire place before you find the gate going where you're going. It's not alphabetical. It's not based on themes or anything. I come to your site, Hyperica, on other occasions because I know that I can go down an alley for most popular grids, or go down an alley and you have a tendency to theme things, shopping grids and stuff like that.
Well,
so
I'm doing a lot.
If you land at Littlefield's welcome area, they've got it's actually fairly well laid out where to go from to get to wherever you want to go, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not the regions on grids I'm thinking about. It's just the grids. You can look at them as regions in themselves, and some of them are specialized.
Oh, I see.
So there's Nara Snook, for example, which is really all. She's doing lots of great things, but central focus is literature. There are other grids where the central focus is a medieval role play or fantasy and science fiction. So, if I'm deliberately looking for science fiction stuff, I will probably choose to try and look up a science fiction grid. As opposed to an actual science fiction location on
I see what you mean.
One of the bigger grids. But it's just the way I operate. But
so if you go to the Hyperica website, I have those categories there, but they're not prioritized in any way right now. So in the future, I want to prioritize them by uptime, how much they're up, and by traffic, how often people go there. So that's kind of what I'm working on with those databases. I'm working my way towards that. So next, I'm going to hire a WordPress developer who can do that for the website, who can pull in those rankings and like, for example, automatically take down listings of sites that have been dead for 2 months, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I'm working on there. What else? So this week has been a big week for Mesh. I wrote about a new tutorial series for Blender that was released. And I myself have tried out Blender. I've downloaded it. I've opened it. I'm the kind of person who just starts using stuff. I could not make head or tail out of Blender.
It makes my head hurt.
So I gave up. But when I was reviewing this tutorial series, the part where she said it only takes 10 seconds to do the first tutorial, I was like, okay, I can do 10 seconds. So I did the first tutorial in 10 seconds. And then the second tutorial took like a minute and showed you how to use the mouse to like move around. Which I didn't know how to do that before. It's different. And so I did that. And now I had a monkey head. And so I exported it and I imported an OpenSim. And I now have a mesh that I created from scratch that I imported to OpenSim. So I'm very proud of myself. I'll never do this again, probably.
But
wow.
It's what's a lifetime achievement that you can now forget and say, I've
was
been there, done
achievement.
that.
Yes. And I definitely do appreciate mesh builders and creators a lot more, and I'm willing to pay more money for meshes than maybe I did before. But also, I'm not scared of Blender anymore. So if someday, if someday I can see myself editing somebody else's mesh or maybe building a simple one myself in the future sometime, she's got more tutorials coming along. So I'll see how maybe I'll go through some more. But those two that are up there right now.
Are these Chiquillon's tutorials?
Yes, Chiquillon's. Yeah.
She's on Canada here, which is they're very good, those ones.
I have mastered Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, InDesign, Illustrator. I mean, I'm pretty good with software. I just can't deal with Blender. It just makes my head explode.
You know, it's so funny. I before I became involved in virtual worlds, 8-9 years ago. I used to. Well, I ended up getting roped into being a trainer, mostly for Adobe Photoshop. But I'd lived in this 2D world. I could handle still images. And as a designer, earlier on, I used to design stage sets and things that were 3D in reality, sort of thing. But they were sort of, they're layer-based, they're components, and early stuff. I forget the name of them now, but early 3D software came along. Look at it. I thought I was a whiz at this stuff, and I took one look at it and thought, "Oh my crumbs! You've got to be kidding." I didn't. It wasn't until I was actually in Second Life initially that I even could conceive of a control panel and enabled me to manipulate 3D space. I had 3 axes instead of 2. And I've sort of got used to it now, but it's very daunting for people who use traditional media, for example, who really have no 3D construct tools available.
I have the utmost respect for people who can build, and especially mesh creators who do it well. It's absolutely astounding.
Yeah, having hired somebody to do the Hyperica stuff, my rebuild of the region, I have to say there's a big difference in being able to stack cubes on top of each other to actually building something that looks nice. And there's such a huge gap in there. I mean, in the wake, so I posted this interview of Tarna Wells, and people were talking about, well, everyone's switching to mesh and people don't build anymore. It's like, well, no, people do both. People put stuff down, people do some basic building, and then once it's beyond their ability, then they hire somebody or buy it, and it's not an either or situation. So I can make a plywood block I can make a roof a different color. I can put down a sidewalk. I can move a plant. I can do this kind of stuff. I know how to use the building interface. I can't make anything looking good with it, but I can do it. Having mesh available doesn't lower my building skills. It gives me more stuff to build with.
Yeah, I like you, and I think was Jessica mentioned a minute ago. You know, I tend to be self-taught. I go on a piece of software and I just explore it. Then I go away. Then I go away and read the manual to know what I've missed, and then I do it until I've fiddle until I did everything. And you know, just the other day I was telling Tara this that I actually came across I would sort of find how things had been made, and I'd take them apart and try and redo them and things. And I actually made a brim the other day, which was a single brim, but it was a double entrance turning gateway. And originally, I would actually have just made a cylinder once upon a time and cut the path so it was sort of hollow, and that would do for my thing. But I realized that using a tube prototype to do it gave me a whole lot of extra things on the edit menu. So I could have I could have double hollows.
I think the term for that is tortured prims.
Yeah,
I know a few builders who do things with prims they're not meant to do, and comes out with interesting results.
But the magic was it worked. Hey, it actually worked, and I put it in parts of the build down south here. So we learn a lot of copy paste and investigation. You can actually learn things, and I personally am a great fan of learning things that way. It gives you if it's something you discover yourself rather than just read or run through a tutorial, I think you remember it better and you get to grips with it better. But that's just my personal take.
I think that the only people who are hurt by new high-end content are the people who make mediocre content, because now they have competition, and they're hurt by competition both in the low end and in the high end. They're hurt by competition for freebies, because if freebies are good enough to compete with their mediocre content, then it's hard to convince somebody to pay money for it.
Yeah, hard sell.
And also, if you're competing, if you're the same price for your content as really nice high-end content, you also have a hard time convincing customers to pay you money for something that's not as good. So, but that's always true for everybody, in business, to improve.
That's true for everything, though. That's just progress. That's just how progress happens.
Yep, exactly.
And if you don't keep up with the progress, then you fall behind.
There is I forget the name of the machinima maker. With the tiniest, but he did a blog post earlier in the week which said he was sort of disheartened with High Fidelity, which has been in the alpha for a long while, simply because he sees the way it's going. It's going to be rather. It could be rather elitist in the creative side. In other words, he can't just go in there and make what he did like he did in Second Life. It's all going to be down to people who can work offline in mesh and who script this and script that and upload it into the environment. The creative tools are not there in the environment, which I remember we were talking offline before we came in earlier with Jessica. We were thinking the sudden increase in traction for OpenSim, and possibly this whole network of the hypergrid will supersede what is currently Second Life, especially if other different kinds of platforms come along that make the viability of Second Life less financially viable long term, of course.
That's a good point, because user created content is a huge part of virtual worlds. And if you don't allow user created content, if all you have is professional content, then you're significantly changing the barriers to entry and increasing prices. So that could be an advantage, competitive advantage for OpenSim. I agree with you going forward. Now, speaking of content and prices, I didn't write about this yet because, there's been some yo-yoing. But on our favorite grid, Naviworld.
I wondered if there was a connection when you said yo-yoing. Thank you, Alex.
So I was on that grid talking to Alex because I was, making sure that the hypergrid connections worked and everything. and he took me to his shopping mall, and he told me that he has been reaching out to creators who have left Second Life and buying licenses to their content and bringing that content over to OpenSim as free, fully licensed content that can be used on any grid.
Yeah.
And he
As
says,
in Creative Commons?
no, not Creative Commons, but he has a license for it, and he's distributing it for use on any grid, except I think commercially or for resale.
Yeah.
So he is he says he's got 15,000 items of content right now, and that's something he's been investing money into. So now he has invested quite a bit of money into his, the Aviworld's grid over the past, that's been going up and down all the time. So the latest thing, he's moved to additional servers. I believe he said his hosting is with CloudServe, but I don't know for how long, so it might have changed since then, but that's the last that I knew. So he's got stable servers, and he's investing in content, and again, he's giving away free land on the grid. So that's interesting. And speaking of free land, other regions are giving away, other grids are also giving away free parcels and free acres. Pillars of Mist just launched. They're giving away free acre lots as well for homesteading. If you're interested in, one of the things I'm going to set up in my destination guide is a free land section, so people can go and grab some plots if they want some really easily.
It's a really odd thing. I was discussing this with Winter Silversmith, who's on Great Canada Grid, but it was raised to next door. It's getting to the point, and this is great, where OpenSim land, you can actually get a region now for probably what is less than the cost of some small parcel in Second Life. But one of the consequences of this is, I think, that people who want to homestead, who have just a bit of pocket money available, as it were, can actually afford to buy a whole region on the grid these days and take that over. And we were discussing this and saying, well, what is Winter's next door here? Is there any point in setting up these little beach houses and apartments and trying to rent them when actual real estate itself is just so cheap? And I was saying that probably the future of OpenSim is going to rely a lot more not on ownership of land and things, but in services. For example, somebody who can now afford to buy a whole region for themselves on the grid to be their estate, instead of a little house on the plot, can afford to do that. But they don't, the kind of people that are being targeted there possibly don't know anything about how to run their own sim. They just get their own sim. And that the future market may be people like estate managers who can, you might only pay $10 a month for your own sim, but you maybe have to pay a premium of $2 a month more towards a part-time estate manager who actually runs all the technical back end and the affairs of your estate. So it could be a growing business here, and there isn't really anything like that in Second Life because of the land model has this sort of preset system, and of course land in Second Life has always been phenomenally expensive.
Well, I think he just shifts everything over. Somebody who would go into a sandbox in Second Life could now, and use that for free, could now get their own free parcel. Somebody in Second Life who rents an apartment can get a bigger place, a whole region for the same price. Somebody who rented a region in Second Life can have a whole grid. And so it just expands all your options when the prices go down. And then I think the other thing that grids can do for parcels is give away parcels for free as a way of marketing their grid and upsell those people to full-scale region owners. Because when you have somebody there on your grid with a parcel and they show up all the time, they're invested in your grid, and you can talk to them about what they want and what kind of features they want, what would make them upgrade, and have a relationship and a dialogue with those customers, because of course, like no business plan ever survives its first contact with customers.
Yeah.
So you want to have as much contact with customers as possible. I mean, there's so many grids out there who put up a land sales page and nobody comes. Well, you have to figure out what customers want and how to offer it to them. And having maybe free or super low cost renters with plots or quarter regions can give you some of that exposure to customers that maybe they otherwise won't want to fork over for an entire region, but they might want to experiment with your grid. Because of all the users on OpenSim, not all of them have their own full regions.
Oh no.
So there's still a big audience of people out there who may want some land to start with, and who will work up their way to a region at some later point. So there's that, and the market obviously is growing very quickly. So I would definitely experiment with different business models there.
Let me give your voice a rest a bit, for Maria. I realise we've sort of nearly been on an hour now, and we've barely heard for a silent guest over here, Pathfinder. Are you still there?
Oh, excellent.
I'm totally still here.
Very good.
I'm still here.
You've been very quiet. It's been a while since you've been on the show, and bearing in mind this, discussion just now as to trends and stuff like that. What have your observations been of late in the last few months about the growth of the hypergrid, the growth of open simulators, and the way things are developing in general? Because you tend to be quite on the ball with these things.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you. Well, I think the most interesting thing to me personally has just been the ongoing vigor of the hypergrid safaris.
Yeah.
Because we're now approaching. Let's see, last week was the 47th safari.
Yeah,
47.
It's near a year. Yeah.
It's almost we're approaching the magic 52, which is a whole year's worth of excursions, and I'm just really amazed by how diverse the continued explorations are, all the amazing places, and not just going places that are kind of vacant, but like going places where, and here are the people who are creating the space and meeting, people who are participating in different communities like Nara's Nook.
Yeah.
So there are many more interesting places, and they're also filled with many more people, and that was always, I think back to the, I think of it like the Middle Ages of the hypergrid, right? When I started doing Adventurers Club back in,
same group, same
5 years ago.
One destination at a time, slow progress.
Yeah,
yeah,
and back in the Dark Ages, it was first of all, it was really hard to jump places, and you would get to places, and there were sometimes like places that were created and were just kind of almost zombie places. It's like, who knows what this region or this grid is used for, but it's up, and it was interesting. But there were plenty of kind of ghost town spaces that we would discover that were sort of moments frozen in time, right? But now I'm just very impressed with like, and here we're going to go here and we're going to have a live performance from a musician, or we're going to go to this artist sim, and guess what, the artist is going to meet us there and talk about what they do. So I think twofold is the two things that have impressed me the most are, one, really the folks involved in organizing and coordinating the hypergrid safari. So Thurza and Wizzy and all of the folks that volunteer to help, they're just doing a fantastic job. And at the same time, just the richness of the places and the communities that are available to explore. So from that purely subjective, purely qualitative, experiential perspective, I'm seeing a really beautiful and good thing, which is just this growth in places and spaces and communities across the hypergrid. And it's just I can't express my enthusiasm enough.
I totally agree. I mean, looking forward to Safari on every Wednesday. I've been able to make it. It's kind of a highlight. And it's not so much a highlight when my teleports don't work, but I mean, it has taken on a character of its own. It's like you meet up with, everybody wants to be on the Safari, which are growing numbers, and the people change week by week. And as you say, the destinations are so varied. You really feel you're in like a living club of explorers, and you're chatting, and the whole thing's going on. It's just
and you're meeting other people. I mean, that's the amazing thing. I mean, I remember in the dark ages of the hypergrid, which was 5 years ago, if we actually ran into somebody else on our little excursions, it was
golly. Yes.
Oh wow, look, there's someone else, that we've discovered, and now it's just kind of a routine. It's we're going to go here, we're going to watch a live play or something, or an exhibit or a presentation or whatever, and it's like, oh, and there are all these other people there as well. So that tells me that there's a not only are there more people just building things in open sim and hypergrid connected grids and regions, but there are more people doing things in them.
Jessica and I were talking earlier before we came on air, about, I suppose the right word is pioneering. There was a sense, certainly when I joined Second Life initially, 8 or 9 years ago, you felt you were in pioneering territory. There was also something new, always something new to discover. And, it's now second generation, and, there's still wonderful stuff there. And, you could spend more than a lifetime just walking around on foot in Second Life alone. But there are things that have almost become cliches. There are whole builds that don't really look that different from others. And there are lots of people who use it for specific communities, which is good. They get tribal. Maybe some people just have nice houses there they don't have in real life and stay in them, or maybe hang out with their friends. All of this is good in its own right, but it's almost as if the pioneering spirit is not there anymore. And when I was talking to Jessica, we thought, possibly, it's actually that pioneering spirit now has finally begun to move to places like the hypergrid. So the people are here, and there's a lot of variety, and there's of things, but it actually is always different, and people are doing very new things that maybe in some of the more traditional platforms, which of course walled gardens anyway, they may not be doing. Do you think that may be the case?
Yeah, I think that's a very perceptive perspective that you have there, and I think the other thing to realize is there are these natural sort of evolutionary stages or steps in the process of pioneering and populating spaces and places and creating communities. And this is all you see this replicated in the physical world, and you see different types of those steps happening in online multi-user environments. And so you have this, you have the initial pioneering stage, which is mostly like very few people going out there and just kind of exploring environments and very occasionally running into each other. Then you have another stage in pioneering where you actually have all these really interesting communities forming in an environment, and they're reaching out to each other because they're creating their own little communities, but they're also exploring each other's communities. Yeah. And the interesting thing I think with Second Life is that it's at more of an end game stage in a mature environment where you have lots of different communities, but they really don't. They're kind of they've settled. Right.
Yeah.
And so they're more introverted than extroverted. Right. So you have people who are like participating in the same, like vampire community, and they never leave their two regions in Second Life. They just do their little thing. So you have consequently in OpenSim and hypergrid enabled environments right now this really awesome stage where you have groups, thriving communities scattered all over the place, and they're reaching out to each other, and they're exploring each other's communities as well. And that's why I think something like the hypergrid safari is really in a perfect pitch situation right now to take advantage of that stage in the evolution of community.
And in fact, these communities, of course, are very often to be located not in their own regions, but in their actual own grids. And the fact that It's not just that these grids are interconnected so they can reach out to each other, but of course they have a lot more control in developing along their own path, as it were, than they ever would have done.
Yeah,
The interesting thing about
that's a really good
that,
point.
Yeah.
Jessica, sorry, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's something that Second Life never had. In Second Life, it was always everybody's still all part of the same thing, and quite often, new people would come into your region. Let's say it was your homestead or something, and the reaction generally, back then was, "Are they going to grief me?" That kind of thing. Whereas with Hypergrid and with OpenSim, everybody having their own very distinct communities, when people come into their community through Hypergrid, it's we have a visitor, and it's they're happy to see them. It's something that Second Life I don't think really had very much, and I think it's great. I think really in many ways, and a lot of people in Second Life disagree with me, and including some of my own people on my team. I still believe that the future of virtual worlds lies in OpenSim in one form or another.
Absolutely. I mean, I think on the greater level, the future lies in shareable systems, interoperability, protocols that will actually govern maybe different, variety of devices. I'm going to pop back to Maria for a second, because since Maria was last on the show, and I'm sure this cost her radar in the news, there was the announcement about Improbable. Did you come across this?
Improbable?
Yeah. Or did you
Improbable what?
Platform. Okay,
No,
I will reiterate
this.
that we covered this in a couple of times in previous weeks. I mentioned, I think I was talking earlier, wasn't I, Jessica, about it? Are you aware of this, Pathfinder?
Oh, there was my microphone off again. Yeah, the developers of the interesting thing is they've got they're working with the what's his name, the guy who did DayZ, right? Insanely popular survival game, but the idea of creating scalable environments that are generated by algorithms to basically create almost limitless spaces. I mean, it's interesting. It's something that I think it's just really early, obviously, to be saying whether or not it's a really viable technology in the long term. I mean, I'd have to see some games that are actually built with it. I know there are a number of ones under production, but
I think I actually, especially as Maria didn't want it, it's basically this came into my radar about 3 weeks ago. Basically, they have a team of about 15 core people working on this platform, for want of a better word, and they've been working on it for 3 years, and they've been supported in the UK here by Cambridge University. They are now a separate enterprise, and they really came to attention because they received some phenomenal amount, I forget the figure now, of investment capital. Which is clearly maybe something to do with the interest in VR and everything else. But what they're working on, the first thought I thought is, will Philip Rosedale have competition to High Fidelity? But then I sort of concluded they're really working on a very deep level here. They don't talk directly about common protocols and things, but they do say that the idea of the system is that it will join together spaces in the way that you could go from, say, a self-contained Unity environment seamlessly into something direct with the Unreal Engine, and presumably something with Havoc or the technologies that OpenSim use. And it seems that their idea of a real underbelly of a distributed system that could potentially connect all these other enterprises that we're working on together. It's a bit like the way the web transformed the internet. I'm very my favorite phrase these days is that we're all about making the transition from pages to spaces. this is my new favorite phrase. Instead of going to look up a page where the web was the original web before it got bastardized as it is now, it was all about sharing information. Now it's about commercial delivery systems. But, none of that would ever happen without Tim Berners-Lee and the protocols that made the World Wide Web work smoothly on top of the internet. And on top of the World Wide Web, you've got all the JavaScripts, the CSSs, and all the technologies that have grown up on it since. And virtual worlds, or just immersive spaces, aren't connected by any of these root protocols. And somebody who would actually drill like a mole underground under these platforms and find a way of connecting them would be a sort of dream, wouldn't it? Path.
Yeah, I think so. It's again, personally though, I'm just, it's like I'm more in the show me stage of things these days, because there's so much flying out there, like, oh, this is going to be great, and it includes all the stuff with all the virtual reality stuff too. It seems like every single day someone's coming out with a new hardware device, that's going to be revolutionary for VR. And I keep thinking, well, show me when it's actually in the hands of consumers, if it's something that's viable technology. And so that goes the same, not just hardware but software, as well. So I mean, I really, I'm always guardedly optimistic about a lot of things like this, but I'm very much sort of color me cautious.
Yeah, hard not to be skeptical.
Yes, they've been around for a little while. Yeah, they've been around. Probable's been around for a while, and it's interesting, them coming out of a university background, but at the same time, and yes, they got a lot of money, but yes, I could think of a number of companies that started that way and they just basically faded away. Who knows? Yeah. Before they could actually bring something to market that was truly revolutionary. I mean, we're hearing a lot of game developers saying that Improbable's technology is amazing, but at the same time, I don't see any games or environments that are made with it. So,
I think it's down to the thing of it. Well, it's supposed to incorporate different architectures. So it will be adaptable with Unity 3D as much as the Unreal Engine or anything else. So, I presume the first demos. I think I did hear there is something up that is an excellent demo, but I imagine the actual demos that were made could actually be used, could be made, as it were, with a whole different systems that just work with this underlying system.
I guess for myself, right now, I categorize Improbable's technology along in the same bucket with Magic Leap's, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, Magic Leap, it's so fantastic," and I keep thinking, "Show me a demo, not like that little YouTube video that they distributed, which was basically, just a little sort of proof of concept mock-up.
Exactly.
I mean, show me people wearing these devices in the physical world." So I'm still, so I kind of think of Improbable in the same bucket as Magic Leap. It's like, oh my God, it could be amazing, but call me when there's something to really see.
There was an announcement. I think it's called VR Talk or something, some TV show that launched this week. And at first I thought it was like Avatar TV, and in fact it might have a component to that. But apparently you can only watch it through an Oculus Rift. My immediate thought was, but this is a trap. What is the future of something that only works through Oculus Rift? I can't watch it because all I go see is, there's two curly pictures side by side and totally watchable as television or even video. And I think you're limiting the audience there. Jessica and I were talking earlier and saying, forget the size of the Oculus Rift and bumping into lampposts and stuff. Maybe think of something you can slot your smartphone into, like cardboard and lightweight things that you can fold away and just bring out when you need them. So, you get on a train, you've got a 2-hour train journey, you pull out your glasses, maybe you slot your smartphone into it and enjoy an experience. But we can't go with immersion, full immersion, which is what Oculus is promoting, by sacrificing our tactile abilities. Like, can't see the keyboard, can't control things the way we used to. It's okay having full immersion, but what happens if we actually use the sort of we lose the kind of haptic interfaces in the process? We got an immersive experience, but we haven't really got immersion because the wow band factor of the new thing has actually come at the sacrifice of some of the other things, the older things we rely on, if you see what I mean.
Well, the where the rubber hits the road is when it gets into the hands of consumers, and you can tout all of the amazing qualities of any particular technology, software and or hardware, but it means nothing until it gets into the hands of consumers. Good examples of that, I can think of two off the top of my head. One is the Wii controller. People thought the Wii controller was going to revolutionize all of Nintendo's games, and people realized that consumers really only wanted to use it for a few types of games like tennis and bowling, and then that was that. And then look at
Connect.
I'm having a senior.
Microsoft Connect seems to have
Connect, exactly. The Connect, right? Which was, this is going to change how you interface with everything. And if you recall, Microsoft basically took that horse out back and shot it in the head when they decided to not make it a mandatory component of the Xbox One, right? When they pulled it out of the Xbox One's mandatory architecture, so everybody basically is buying, the cheaper Xbox One without the Kinect because no one really wants to use it.
Yeah.
So that's get that, history, coming events tell their future in the past,
Yeah. And a lot of this hardware stuff, does actually intrigue me because, you've got the Oculus, you've got Leap Motion, you've got smartphone VR and all this, but to me, they are simply component parts of the future. None of them address none of them truly address the issue of future of interfacing. They're simply options that might come into the scenario.
Yeah, I think if somebody comes up with a really...
I can't help but feel that... sorry.
Jessica? Yeah.
I can't help but feel that any new technology, no matter how much better it makes whatever it is, your world, it has to also make things easier. And I don't think Oculus Rift makes things easier. I mean, we're in a society now where everything we gravitate to is things that make what we're doing at any given time easier. And I just think Leap Motion, for example, it's a pretty cool little device, but it's not easier than a mouse. Oculus Rift is really cool, but it's not easier than your monitor. And I can't help but feel that although some of these things that are coming out are really groundbreaking, if they don't make it easier to do whatever it is you want to accomplish, it's not going to be widely adopted.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Well, when you nearly joined us last week, Jessica, there was another hot topic, and probably get Maria back in on this, which was the demise of SL Go, which was we were going to have Dennis on with you and everything from On Live because he's an ardent Second Lifer. I was being last week about on change.org to bring it back because I thought, that's a big site. It's not like you're voting to impeach a president. And I thought, well, a campaign to bring back On Live and petition Sony might have been a thing, but to actually have a campaign that's targeted on such a small niche market as the SL Go really does, I wish them luck.
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely appreciate people wanting to do a petition, but this is Sony we're talking about, and the reality is, we worked very closely with OnLive to get Firestorm Go or the Firestorm capability into OnLive, and the reality was OnLive was always up for acquisition. In fact, anybody who considers they charge $10 a month and you can use their service for unlimited hours, you could just leave yourself logged in all month for $10 a month. They're not making a lot of money from that. No. I think their real goal was to boost subscriptions. And by boosting subscriptions, they look more attractive. And that necessarily, I don't think that's why Sony bought them. But they were always... their end goal was always to try to get acquisition. Of course, they'd hoped they would get purchased and then continue what they're doing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Sony bought them for Sony's own PlayStation streaming system, and so I love that people got together and did a petition, but it really that it's just not going to go anywhere.
Yeah,
completely
up against Sony
it's just
Corporation.
it's Sony. Even if Sony read the petition, maybe they did, I don't know, but when you consider the dollars to cents that they would get from the niche of Second Life versus the PlayStation, for example, you're talking millions of users, millions and millions of users.
You're sort of laughing. You're laughing when you imagine them even taking that seriously in their boardroom.
Yeah,
you know, in the future,
it's not going to
it would be different. But
there is actually possibly some light at the end of the tunnel for them.
Yeah.
Anyone not aware of Anara Pay? She's a very popular Second Life blogger, and she recently she just did a follow-up article as well on Amazon AppStream.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, Linden Lab is interested in what SL Go had in the way that so you got to look at Linden Lab's biggest problem is new sign-up, new user retention, keeping users into Second Life for more than a day after they first signed up.
Yeah.
I think it's atrocious how many people sign up and then they have to go through this process of installing the viewer, and then they log in, and then they're like a cloud, and they just log out and they're done. They go on to something else that's easier to run and install. And Linden Lab experimented with logging people in on a web browser, and from what I understand, that was actually an attempt at streaming the viewer.
This I think was the thing I mentioned in my news
2011
highlights at the beginning. That was actually Gakai, the guy who was in Game Politics in the week. It was it was the rival to OnLive. It came later, but it came earlier too. OnLive's got a long history, and it went through a lot of metamorphosis. I mean, even BT in the UK were invested in it at one time. Great plans for it, and then it went small, and then it got semi-big again. Gakai, were there all through that. They came after the original OnLive, but they've still been plodding away, while OnLive surfaced.
Linden Lab's interest would be, if their interest would be not that they want to. Let's face it, you're not going to get new users signing up because you're streaming your viewer over internet. You're going to get the same niche. It's not going to expand the niche that is Second Life and virtual worlds. But it can potentially get new signups into Second Life with less trouble, faster, and therefore possibly improve new user sign up or new user retention.
Yeah, and I actually think there is a possibility on new users there. Something I always liked, we actually have a company called Metaverse Spaces, which hasn't been used for anything yet. But when doing television, bringing shows like this to people, who can, it's outreach. People can, obviously people watching Inworld, but on a given show, we might be talking in very general terms, and somebody who's not involved with virtual worlds in any direct way can find it interesting. Listening to us. And I always thought that, say I'm filming a music concert or a conference or something like that in World, as it's been broadcast on the web as video, wouldn't it be lovely if there was a little box underneath saying, like what you're watching, why not go there?
Yeah, click here and join.
And they will click there, and then they would get a streaming version of the actual interactive environment. So it'd be a stepping stone. So they start by watching what we're doing, and then when they're intrigued enough, they've only got a button that they need to press, and they get a sort of a guest visa to enter the world as a sort of presence and get a feel for it. And then maybe they go and download some, heavyweight client and really get in there. But it's a gradual process. We seduce them from the television standpoint and gradually immerse them to a greater extent. But of course, we can't actually do that at the moment. And
Well, I know that Linen Lab is absolutely interested in getting people into the virtual world without having to go through all the headache of installing a viewer and whatnot. In fact, Oz Linden, from what I understand, at a recent user group, put out the word that if any developer happens to find a way to develop, a viewer that runs in a web browser, they'll be making some money from Linen Lab. So we know they're looking for that.
now, I think I mean, the report actually suggests that, I mean, it's not just Second Life, it's OpenSim. We really don't have to go
Absolutely.
time to go into all the little things. I mean, Firestorm is, despite having their own client, Firestorm is by far the most popular viewer in Second Life, more so than Linden Labs. It's also, I think, for many people, the preferred viewer out here in OpenSim, because in fact, ironically, because it does offer a lot more depth to its interface than Second Life does, rather than a lighter version. But when Firestorm Go came along, shall we say, it meant that whole what we call SL Go thing was open to OpenSim too, because people simply chose your viewer.
I was really happy about that. Yeah, I was really glad about that.
We could do the same here. Now, it's two things have happened this week, which I guess come to the news. Firstly, there is the debate, and actually Hamlet Hall even got into this, had a fairly good article on this. For example, Gakai is still there. Linden Lab have connections to Gakai because of that other older experiment, although it was back under old management. Possibly they could try and work out a deal to bring that online, because I remember it working very well. Or they could develop something of their own and run it from the Amazon business. I forget the name that they're trying out. Or the third
Amazon
thing,
AppStream, yeah.
that's it. Or the third thing that you may have come up against this week is that a chap called Nebadon, who works on the core OpenSim code, along with Justin CC and various people, is one of the main people behind OS Grid, in fact.
I know Neb. Yeah.
He actually posted a video. It's actually reposted again, but it's the same video this morning, I think. And he's actually using this look viewer, which is basically developed from Impudence, but it's got limited capability at the moment, but it works. It sort of works on the web and effectively streams, just like the service we've been looking at. And he actually put up a video of himself using the OnLook viewer and streaming OS Grid. So there are other options open. I think for Linden Lab and OpenSim, of course, it doesn't have a CEO as such. It's all down to relationships between grids. But certainly in Linden Lab's case, because where they're walled garden, they can choose whether to go with a service and develop a relationship. They can choose where to develop their own, which does the same thing, or they can choose to partner with some kind of technology where they would actually provide the service, but they will be working with something like OnLook's system. So I think they can go if they want to. If they really feel that SL goes a loss, Linden Labs, I think, certainly are in a position to, they've got at least three choices to try and develop something of their own, whether it's be in partnership or individually. And,
the question, it's obviously that there are definitely alternatives out there. I mean, this Amazon AppStream looks really good. What Nebadon looked into, and it's actually quite feasible and not entirely expensive to get going for them. But then you got to wonder, because Abby Linden has already stated that the new platform is going to be cross-platform. So we can assume that they are developing it for iPhone, for Android, for PC, for Mac, for everything.
Yeah.
And so for the new platform, I would expect, unless they're already going this route, I would expect that they may not be interested in doing this for the new platform. But there is still Second Life, as we know it right now.
I have a hunch that aspects of the new platform will take care of accessibility and multi-platform.
That'll be taken into account.
Therefore, the imperative of something very fast like streaming probably isn't relevant. But so long as Second Life's around, and it won't be going anywhere very quickly. It might tend to go some eventually long down the line, but certainly not quickly. Then they may be interested from the Second Life point of view, bringing something like this up. And I, of course, am far more interested in something like the Unlock viewer with streams and possibly kind of type things, because they could possibly, like Fast on Go did, access OpenSim as well. There's no CEO of OpenSim per se that anybody can contact to make a commercial deal, or it works.
Well, that's just it. Who's got to pay for the service, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody has to pay for the service. There is bandwidth involved.
Oh yeah.
And that's where things get difficult. If Linden Lab were to take on Amazon AppStream, it would probably only work for their viewer, because it probably wouldn't be something that Firestorm or other third-party viewers could adopt, unless we somehow integrated a system where the end user could handle the billing details with Amazon directly and not through the viewer, and then just have it work. And I don't see how that could. I don't see how that would work out.
It's very difficult. Even with Kai, you attempted to log into a specified region that was testing the service, and you couldn't actually teleport to other regions that weren't compatible. So you might have a grid. Sorry, Maria.
You could resell Amazon services. I mean, most of the companies out there are based on Amazon in the back end. So Second Life could charge people $10 a month or 20, whatever, to access their viewer. And who cares if they access OpenSim? Second Life is getting paid for it, presumably enough to cover their costs. If not, they could shut off access to OpenSim.
I mean, the only reason I think Linden Lab would adopt something like that would be to try to improve new user new sign-up retention rates of new sign-ups.
And
as a regular thing, I don't think.
And a ease of use and introductions at the back.
Right. But if they make money at it, or if at least they break even, I mean, there's nothing to keep them from using a third-party viewer or from allowing access to OpenSim like SLGo has been doing. Or if somebody else like Nebadon makes it into a paying service, he can charge everybody to use it, regardless of what grid they access, Second Life or OpenSim. He would make a lot more money if it was possible to access both OpenSim and Second Life through this, because then he'd have a lot more customers.
Well, I guess On Live was an ideal here in a way, because although they were, had their own patents and it was all, that was their value. They were actually making money as an independent service. From On Live's point of view, On Live's customers were saying, "Well, we like SLGo, but can't we have Firestorm Go, because that's more useful to us?" So we had Firestorm Go. And so if it's a bit like VVolt's Voice, although some grids no longer use that.
If a third-party company were to come in and buy up subscriptions with Amazon AppStream, they pay Amazon, and then have customers that go to them and pay them, which they then use to pay their bill with Amazon. If a company like OnLive were to show up, I don't know that they would do really well, because Second Life Virtual Worlds is still a niche. It's still maybe a million people.
But
there's a business model there.
And, increasingly, it may be wild goose chases, but increasingly this is where we're seeing the advantage of all this enthusiasm about VR hardware. This new hardware-driven environment really doesn't have that much to do with virtual worlds per se, or the software that runs them. It's all virtual realities, so to speak. But it's sense that there are people around who see a VR startup of some sort, or something that does involve virtual worlds, and they are willing to invest in what may be a small market at the moment, because they see it getting bigger, for better or worse. So whether that pans out or not, we don't know. But, the investors or whoever actually see a potential bigger market and will therefore go with the current smaller market to get their footing. Okay, now we always need a longer program here. But I'm looking at the
We're
clock,
running out of
and
time.
we have. If I can find my glasses, I rather suspect we've reached our 90-minute mark. Oh yes, we've just slipped over it. We haven't really gone over it. So there's a hell of a lot to discuss. I've got to have both you and Pathfinder back again shortly. It's been far too long, Pathfinder, and it's just been too wonderful to say having you here, Jessica. We're not finished yet. But give us 10 minutes to wrap or whatever. Maria, we obviously started engaging in the conversation randomly here. Was there anything else in your news pieces that you can get into about a couple of minutes that you think are highlights that you didn't mention?
Oh, let's see. The adult metaverse community was again the fastest growing community of the third-party Google Plus communities. So for people who think that there's no interest in adult stuff in OpenSim, it actually creates a problem for me because the adult subpage on Hyperica is one of the 10 most visited. Do I add that to my destination guide? I think obviously people want it, but nobody admits they want it. So
yeah, I think you have to. I mean, it's like my video feeds and Twitter feeds. What videos I would use as MetaWorld broadcasting. I'm very fussy about. It's got to be good quality. Discussion, no interfaces showing on the camera and stuff like that. But things I pick up every day from YouTube, add to my favorites playlist stream. I just grab everything that isn't absolutely awful or isn't downright problematic. So when you're aggregating information, you sort of owe it to be impartial and to a certain extent. And I think you have a category for the adult metaverse. It's you have a separate one for arts, for different kinds of destinations, whatever. It's just one category amongst many. It's not right up front. People don't have to go to it, and the fact that a lot of people go to it and not admit it is just
So on Hyperica it's buried in a menu. On the Hyperica grid it's behind a door that says don't enter if you're under 18. But in the destination guide it's going to be, if I put it in there, it's going to be one of the first top choices as a subcategory. So I guess I can bury it a couple levels deep so it's not jumping into people's eyes like, oh no, there's adult stuff on the hypergrid.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's subtle ways you can get around that. You can you can actually editorially control the top interface of the destination guide.
Exactly.
That people never get to the number one destination simply, which happens to be a sex destination. They actually have to choose their interest before they see the top ranking destinations following their interest. The fact people click on adult, well, that's their problem. That by the time they've chosen that, they can't complain because that's obviously what they want. Yeah. I think what we want to avoid is that, the journalist is going to pop into your site and see what's available, and the first thing he sees is lap dancing. It's reiterating the worst cliches.
Except it addressed the first user retention issue.
It does. But, it's
like, who doesn't want to stay if they see lap dancing?
Well, let's face it. Let's look back to the days of the
sex sells.
Betamax and VHS wars. VHS was inferior, but it's the one that won, and it won largely because everybody who wanted pornography got VHS pornography. They pioneered, and they will be. And I think that certain area of interest is very basic and always will be on the ball for pioneering in anything that comes along, including all the virtual reality hardware and everything else. So, prudish people can laugh and journalists can make a thing of, sex sells. That's why we're telling you there's sex in virtual worlds. But, isn't this outrageous? They're hypocrites, when it comes down to it. But I agree. You want to avoid perpetrating the myth that to certain people, virtual worlds are all about sex because they never investigated and found out there's a whole lot more. Like real life, there's a whole lot more than just the red light district. So, it is, it's always seemed a shame about Second Life being associated with the sort of invasion of the flying pink things or whatever. But in reality, it doesn't matter. Second Life is sort of tainted by that, but it wouldn't matter if they called themselves Distant Vision or any other name under the sun. Whatever name they had for Second Life, that name would have been equally tainted because that would have been what would have happened in that environment, almost certainly. So it's not something you can pin on Linden Labs or Second Life particularly. It was bound to happen in any open environment like that. It was bound to get branded by sensationalist media that way. And, it's really just up to time and progress to live that down.
All right.
Okay. You did have a post, by the way, but I've got it here. It was 2 days ago. Hypergrid Business. New grid opens with mystery focus. And that's
breedable
all I've
cats.
got. Of course, right. Okay. This is a fascination. Tell us
Breedable
about
cats.
This one. Yeah.
The mystery focus is just mysteries. They have mysteries on. That's their mystery focus. It was one of those come-ons headlines. But what's more interesting for you is that Stray Cats, the game, has opened beginning this month. And it's an open sim grid dedicated to breedable cats. And I posted the links to their website. And they have a couple of really cute videos there for you to watch. So I wish them all the best simply because of their cute videos.
And they're actually appealing for testers, aren't they? For beta.
They're looking for beta testers right now.
If it's got cats, I'm signing up.
Yeah. Is it the crucial question, of course, for me and all of us, in the spirit of things, is it hypergrid enabled?
Well, I'm going to find that out.
Right. Can we buy breedable cats and bring them back to Canada? Oh, yes. I know that Atari Yates will have a new business going if that's the case. Presumably they're as good as kitty cats. Okay.
I love my kitty cats.
Well, the way I like to round up this show and round off this show normally is I like to go around all the guests and participants and, independently really of what we've been talking about, when we've been able to talk, get our ending, is anything exciting that's sort of been happening in maybe about the last week or so or coming up in the next week that you've you sort of more than usually stirred by or something. So I'll start with you, Jessica. Anything exciting coming up or just finished that you think is...
Well, we've just... finished, not just finished. We've been trying to stabilize. We've recently merged up to Linden Labs' latest code. We've gone into code freeze now. We're getting ready for a release. It's a lot of changes, like a lot of changes. And so blog post, we have a preview group. So we have our regular stage of beta testing, which is it's a closed group with beta testers, and it's structured, and they do smoke tests and various things. We like to, before we do a release, throw something out to a bit of a larger group, but not all of Second Life. So they're kind of like phase 2 of our quality assurance process. And so I've just did a blog post, actually, firestormviewer.org, requesting new testers. We'd like to increase our sample size of that group, and that includes people on OpenSim. Sometime this week, we'll be issuing a preview build, which is not a release, but it's past beta. So it's kind of like in between beta and release. And we're throwing out to that group and monitor the group and get an idea of how it's being taken.
Great. I should point out here, just to interject again quickly, there are separate versions of the Firestorm Viewer for OpenSim and for Second Life. And I presume that with all the massive customized upgrades that Linden Labs is bringing to Second Life, then they're much more distinctly apart than they ever have been before, I presume. And,
it's getting harder and harder and harder to stay compatible with OpenSim while still staying compatible with Second Life.
so
It's a real challenge.
As a personal opinion, I suspect I know the answer. I presume you would recommend people download the OpenSim client for OpenSim and
Yeah.
The other one for Second Life, and also
Actually, no.
Okay.
I recommend everybody use the OpenSim version
Oh.
unless you upload mesh.
Oh,
Like if
okay.
you're a content creator and you're uploading mesh with physics, then you might want to use our Second Life only version. But unless you do, there's really no advantage to using the Second Life build up. So
a lot of this has to do with the licensing of the Havoc engine or something that's very specific.
Havoc. So the Havoc, the only advantage people get from Havoc is pathfinding. No relation to pathfinding here.
Yeah.
Is pathfinding in Second Life.
They get me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in that case, everyone's going to grab it. So, unless you own a region and you actually use pathfinding, and since probably not many Lindens will be watching this, nobody uses pathfinding in Second Life. It was a completely.
I wonder
thing,
if they
name.
I wonder if they named pathfinding after a former employee. Sorry.
Pathfinding after Pathfinder? I don't think so.
No.
No.
It's a standard terminology for game developers. It's Pathfinder.
Yeah.
You have it in Unity.
And so, pathfinding, and just nobody uses it that I certainly know of. I might have heard of 2 regions in Second Life that use it since they've released pathfinding. So unless you own a region and you actually have enabled pathfinding, you need it. You need Havoc to see the nav mesh that you lay out basically instructions on where objects are allowed to move. So if that's not you, and if you're not a mesh creator who uploads mesh with physics, please don't be confused. The OpenSim version can upload can upload mesh as well, just not with a physics attribute to it. So
that's
really.
I'm glad you told us that, because my assumption would have been that if I wanted to use it for Second Life, and I have a version that I do use for Second Life, separately from the one I'm in here, I just assumed the Second Life version was the one to go for, but presumably,
and when I say
in
physics,
a way,
I'm talking about like mesh vehicles, for example. So it's actually a pretty small sample of people who need that, and so I actually recommend people use the OpenSim version.
It reminds me here in Canada we Roddy uses bullet physics or something, and it means that all my boats and cars and things from Grid don't work here because the physics engine is totally different. But you would basically, we consider the EOS viewer to be the universal one, and the Linden Lamp one to just be the Second Life specialized one, as it were.
It's really, and actually, anyways, to be honest, most people use the OpenSim version of Firestorm anyway.
So in your
vast majority,
as the leader of the team, is your focus normally in terms of beta testing and stuff with the universal version or with the Linden Lab version, or is it equally? Do you spend as much time on both?
We try to switch back and forth in regards to beta testing, but the reality is we don't get really any beta testing done in OpenSim, and so I would, and that's because we don't have the resources to have people in OpenSim as well as in Second Life in order to monitor and run tests and report back and those types of things. I just don't have the resources, and so our focus always has to be at the greater good, which is where the most greater audience, which is Second Life.
So basically,
but the good folks at Littlefield, we give them builds that they can test, and they give us feedback, and they're really about the only feedback we get from OpenSim in regards to stability and whatnot. So I would like to invite OpenSim users to join our preview group in Second Life if you use Second Life. But the only thing is if you find issues, please report it. You kind of have to log back into Second Life to report it to us.
If
or file it on Jira.
Right, I was just going to say, if folks are on, I think most of us have Second Life avatars, but if there are folks on the hypergrid that don't have Second Life avatars, is there any group they can join by hypergridding over to Littlefield? If they're allowed to.
Well, Littlefield is they're forming a bit of a beta testing group over there. I don't think anything's finalized just yet, but I'd like to do that in the future, certainly.
Great. Well, we've got to have you back to talk more in the future. There's so many issues that have been bubbling under in my mind here. I was just going to ask Jessica, and you could just never get round to it in 90 minutes, I'm afraid. We do need to stick to it. We've run over already, and I know Pathfinder actually has another appointment on the hour anyway. So, Pathfinder, I'm going to ask you the same question that everybody's forgotten now, which is exciting things of the last week or so, and anything coming up that's on your mind.
Yeah, I have two things. One is Nani Ferguson and Ange Monges put together this crazy Easter scavenger hunt. It's just like some crazy Alice in Wonderland crossed with steampunk and some just creepy things too. But it's hilarious. Yeah, it's going to be open for, it's an Easter hunt, and there's a game that's like a multiplayer game. You can kind of play with other folks, but it's fun just to go there. It's amazing just to go there and explore. And the sound design is really, really awesome too. So if you go there, I encourage you to make sure
we have spoken a lot on this program, because when we cover Second Life, we can't, the great hunts, the MAPs and stuff like that, and we're always saying we need a hunt on OpenSim, traveling around the metaverse as some kind of official hunt. I'm working on one here, but it's literally, you'll be finding chapters of a book. You won't be finding anything special in terms of objects. Hunting is just a so great way of exploring that, something I'd really dearly like to see come to OpenSim, and it sounds like what they've done there is a good start and wonderful.
Well,
build.
yeah, you've got Nani and Ange all make these types of hunts for different holidays. So there's one around Christmas time, and when you find the items, there are little gifts that you basically get, and they're objects that you can take back to your own grid. But I just pasted the in chat, but just Google crazy Easter OpenSim, and you'll find information about this place. And the other thing that's actually something that's coming up is I didn't go to the first one. This is the second one, but it's the Immersion Experience Symposium in Montreal, and it's the symposium that's happening in May that is focused on artists, researchers, educators, creators, and consumers of interesting immersive and interactive technologies. And there are a lot of artists. It looks like there's going to be a lot of artists there. Of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff around VR and augmented reality, but also just interactive and immersive experiences in general. And they actually have a poster session that's still a call for posters up until the end of April. So people still have 2 weeks. I'm actually going to put together a poster and have that as a poster presentation. But I'll paste the link into Skype chat. But also, if you just Google Immersion Experience Montreal, you'll see information about this symposium. I guess this is the second one that they've done. I didn't go to the first one, but it just looks really interesting, very creative. The focus being in a very general sense on creating and sharing immersive experiences, which is really what virtual worlds are all about.
Yeah. Great.
That's it for me.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here. And again, I hope we'll see you soon. It's been a long while. For some reason, we had you booked for something, and we're at one show and we missed it or something, and it's been a while. So feel free to drop back anytime. Just let me know, like you did earlier in the week. And with you, Jessica, I'll be on to you again. But if you feel like popping in any Saturday, just let me know.
Of course, thanks.
There's so much to talk about. There always is. Even on a dead week, as we call it, we fill it. Okay, closing thoughts.
I'm doing my monthly statistics coming up in the next couple of days. So if you have a new grid that's not one of the 400 plus grids that I'm currently tracking, please email me. Let me know, Maria@hypergridbusiness.com. And I don't know how you deal with it, Jessica. I get so many emails from grid owners saying, "Get me added to the viewer list." Why won't the viewer list add me to?
The way that works is there are, like you said, 400 some. Can you imagine if we put in their grid list all 400 of those grids? You just couldn't find anything because it's too much. I sort of have to. I hate to do it, but I sort of have to filter. And really just add the grids that have a lot of people, have been established, are stable, and I actually use your website all the time to verify those applications. I get applications all the time, and I just can't approve everybody, because then you become it's counterproductive. You just get too many things.
As you say, it's all too popular now. There are hundreds of grids. Unless you had well, somebody would have to do it for you, I think. But I mean, you could have a nested list, where instead of one long list, they were nested in categories. There is also another glitch there that I do know. It's not so much a glitch, but I do know that Grid, for example, does frequent updates. In fact, I think it's it's late Sunday night after I'm long gone. That every week they're down for about a couple of hours, and they do lots of updates. And almost certainly every Monday they recommend going into Firestorm or whatever view you're using, going into the grid list, selecting the grid, and pressing refresh, because apparently every time grids update to add the open single stuff, things can come with the login URI, and they just recommend you always go in there to refresh.
The reality is, and I encourage people, the reality is Firestorm is open source. We have a wiki page on how to compile. It isn't complicated to take our viewer, compile it yourself, rebrand it. As far as branding, just change the name of it to something that's more grid, compile it, offer it as your own viewer. And that way you can eliminate all the other grids if you want. And just have your grid there. It's really not that difficult to do. But we've also made it as easy as we possibly can for grids to instruct users on how to add their grid to the grid list as well. So.
Yeah, I like the fact you eliminate all other grids except your own. Well, as long as hypergrids.
Oh, believe me, we get requests for that all the time. I mean, at least once or twice a week, somebody emails me. They've got a grid. They want us to create them a custom Firestorm viewer and remove all other grids and just put theirs in.
I can understand if it's an OpenSync grid that isn't on the hypergrid for business.
Yeah, or like an education or business. Yeah, I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
but the reality is we just don't have the time to do that.
Yeah, and
it's so many.
And when sorry.
I receive a lot of requests from people looking to hire viewer developers. Is anybody on your team willing to work for money? Anybody?
Not formally as a member of the team. Firestorm is built around not making money, and I'm very strict that we don't make money, because as soon as we bring money into the mix, priorities get everything changes, and the model that we run on, and the reason why we've been successful is because of this model. Money does not get involved, and that way we're all doing it for the right reason. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There are, though, a couple developers out there. Cinder Biscuits, I think she's usually known in OpenSim. She does custom viewer builds. Mm-hmm. She's not on our team anymore, but she's very familiar with OpenSim. She's very good, and I don't have any idea what she charges or anything like that, but she'd be the best bet for somebody who wants a custom viewer.
And who else? You said there's 2 people?
No, just Cinder. There's nobody else on my team, really. In part because I don't have any developers left who frequent OpenSim or are familiar with it enough to do that kind of thing. And time. Our hands are really, really full, just trying to keep up with things and keep Firestorm stable.
Okay.
Well, it's time to go. We've had a 2-hour show today, so you are special. You've got us for 2 hours this week, and I'm going to be hammered over the head as soon as we off and not keeping it under control. Right. All I can say is we will be back here, same time, same place next week. With another, hopefully, equally interesting show for you. Haven't got a clue who will be with us. Well, actually, I think I do, but I'm not saying anything yet. I don't know for sure. And I'd just like to thank everybody who's been here again. Thanks an awful lot to Jessica Lyon from Firestorm. Thank you, Jessica.
A pleasure.
Thank you, Pathfinder Lester from Pathfinder Empire.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks a
or
lot.
whatever. And thank you, of course, to Maria Kovalov from Hypergrid Business.
Always a pleasure to be here. And hey, my voice sounds better.
You have survived, and we did give you.
I have survived,
and we did.
I didn't die.
We did give you a decent rest, so you got a few breaks there today. So we were slightly worried. But no, congratulations. You've overcome your obstacles. Yes, that's the best way to put it, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, we'll be back next week. So for now, there's only one thing I can say. It's the same thing I say at the end of every show, and that is to wish you all a good morning, or a good afternoon, or a good evening, or indeed a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And we'll see you later.